Meditative joy. As your practice progresses and the mind keeps unifying, meditative joy will naturally arise. This type of joy is a unique mental state that only arises in meditation. To understand it better, let's briefly look at how it compares to joy in general. Although we tend to think of joy as a simple emotional experience, it's actually a comprehensive mental state. This is true of emotions in general. They are functional states of mind. This means they cause the mind to behave or function in very specific ways. They influence what we attend to, how we perceive what we attend to, and the feelings generated in response to what we perceive, all of which exerts a powerful influence over our thoughts, speech, and actions. Joy is also a functioning state that evokes a specific pattern of mental behavior affecting attention, perception, and feelings. First, it predisposes us to notice and preferentially attend to what is beautiful, wholesome, pleasant, and satisfying. At the same time, things that are ugly, unwholesome, or unpleasant tend not to draw or hold attention. Second, the perceptions arising in a joyful mind, no matter what we happen to attend to, always emphasize the positive aspects. The glass will be perceived as half full rather than as half empty, and neither full nor empty. Finally, joy causes our feelings about everything to shift toward the positive end of the spectrum. Something ordinarily experienced as mildly pleasant becomes extremely pleasant. Something neutral, like the simple act of breathing, arouses feelings of pleasure. What would otherwise be mildly unpleasant is experienced as neutral, and what would ordinarily be quite unpleasant is only mildly so. By skewing conscious experience in this way, joy tends to be a stable, self-sustaining state. Selectively attending to the pleasant and preferentially perceiving the good in every situation helps avoid experiences that perturb the state of joy. In other words, the positive effect produced by joy encourages a favorable reinterpretation of conscious experiences that threaten to undermine joy, further adding to its resilience. As pointed out in the sixth interlude, the mental state of sadness or grief is the exact opposite of joy. Sadness orients attention to what is unwholesome, ugly, and dissatisfying. Our perceptions emphasize the problematic aspects of whatever we attend to, and our affective reactions are skewed toward displeasure. Thoughts tend to be pessimistic and cynical, and simply being alive can seem painful. To really grasp the nature of joy, picture a child who has just been told they're going to get something they've wanted for a long time. On hearing the news, they become joyful, excited, and happy, even though they haven't received it yet. The only change is cognitive, but it has put them in the positive mental state of joy. This state will influence the child's perceptions and reactions to whatever happens for as long as it lasts, perhaps hours. For another example, consider when a young person discovers his or her romantic feelings are reciprocated. They feel joyful, exhilarated, and happy. Life's problems seem to fade, and the world is seen through rose-colored glasses. A lover's mind is oriented toward the positive, preferentially sees beauty and goodness, and ignores or looks right through the negative and unpleasant. As in these examples, joy has an energetic, excited, even agitated quality. It's often accompanied by tingling sensations, flushing skin, bouncy, spontaneous body movements, goosebumps, chills running up and down the spine, and enthusiastic verbal expressions. Whenever there's a state of joy, there's also a feeling of happiness. But the two aren't the same. Happiness is not an emotional state, but a specific feeling, the feeling of mental pleasure. Happiness is a component of any pleasurable emotional state, but you can also have happiness by itself. Note that the mental pleasure produced by joy is independent of physical pleasure. The feeling of happiness that joy brings can coexist with and even allow us to ignore physical pain. Joy causes happiness and increases bodily pleasure. In turn, any pleasant experience, mental or physical, can contribute to the arising of joy. There is a reciprocal causality operating here that, beginning on either side, can create a self-sustaining positive feedback loop. As long as we keep attending to the pleasurable and ignoring the unpleasant, the state of joy will be sustained, at least until something interrupts this feedback cycle. Joy seems to be the default state of a unified mind. With ordinary joy, the immediate trigger is the prospect of fulfilling some worldly desire, and the sub-minds of the mind system unify around that desire. In the previous examples, the child and lover become happy because they are going to get what they want. Happiness brings about a temporary unification of sub-minds, which are all in agreement about the object of desire, and this leads to a joyful state of mind. But meditative joy differs significantly from ordinary joy. Unification in meditation is due to mental training rather than gaining some desired object. It also comes from resolving inner conflicts through purification and mindfulness. As unification proceeds, conflict between sub-minds ends, and the usual state of inner struggle ceases. Then, once the mind is sufficiently unified, meditative joy arises spontaneously. As with regular joy, meditative joy generates happiness, referred to as the bliss of mental pliancy. However, we don't have to wait for meditative joy to arise spontaneously via unification. We can actually make it arise earlier. For example, we can use the feelings of satisfaction and happiness that come with your success in meditation to trigger it. This, in turn, can help speed up the unification process, because by intentionally cultivating meditative joy, you invoke a feedback loop. Joy causes happiness and physical pleasure. Happiness and physical pleasure increase unification, and unification causes meditative joy. Once set in motion, the loop ensures that as the mind grows unified, the joy and happiness it produces will induce still greater unification. Meditative absorptions, jhana, are flow states that can also help you take advantage of the positive feedback loop between unification, joy, and happiness. That's why the jhanas are so useful in the adept stages. Once some joy and happiness are present, absorption intensifies the joy and happiness, and a temporary but very strong unification results. When we repeat this often enough, our mind becomes habituated to unification. You may have experienced some mild, brief episodes of meditative joy in stages 4 through 7. You will have experienced longer, more intense episodes if you did the whole body and pleasure jhana practices in stages 6 and 7. However, the joy of grades 4 and 5 piti in stage 8 is something you've likely never experienced before. Energy currents and involuntary movements. Before achieving fully developed meditative joy, you'll encounter various energy currents, involuntary movements, and autonomic activity, all of which can be quite uncomfortable. Eventually, the movements and autonomic reactions will stop, the energy currents will be pleasant, and you'll experience the meditative joy of grade 5 piti. But until then, the flow of newly available energy, due to increasing unification, is quite turbulent. In the ordinary, untrained, and ununified mind, much of the energy generated by individual sub-minds gets used up in inner conflicts, many of them unconscious. As an analogy, picture a group of horses, all tethered together, but with each one trying to move in a different direction. Any movement of the group as a whole will be slow. The direction and speed of movement will depend on the strongest horses, and whenever several horses happen, by chance, to start pulling in the same direction. Abrupt changes in direction will also happen frequently and unpredictably. The behavior of the untrained mind is much the same. Attention wavers and scatters, constantly vulnerable to being captured by new sensory or mental objects. Unrelated thoughts come up. Many different kinds of emotions, including restlessness, doubt, and boredom, arise out of the unconscious mind, each claiming justification and demanding to be responded to. When the mind begins to unify, it's like more of the horses are heading in the same direction at the same time, so the speed and momentum of the group as a whole, that is, the net kinetic energy, increases. The course becomes more consistent, but the movement isn't smooth. In fact, because some animals still resist while others may stumble and be dragged along by the group, it's more violent and erratic than ever. And as long as some keep resisting and try to go in different directions, the turbulence will continue. The available mental energy increases, but until unification is complete, the flow of that energy is turbulent. Turbulent mental energy manifests in various ways. The feeling of energy currents coursing through the body can be tumultuous or even painful, though they can also be mild and pleasant. These energy currents, as well as the involuntary movements and autonomic reactions that often accompany them, were described in detail in the 6th interlude. These currents are the same chi, prana, or inner wind that you experienced in the body scanning and whole-body breath practices of stages 5 and 6. As the mind progressively unifies in stage 8, this energy intensifies. But as long as unification is incomplete, the turbulence intensifies as well. By the end of stage 8, you can consistently unify your mind enough for sustained meditative joy to arise, along with the blisses of physical and mental pliancy. Involuntary movements stop, and the flow of energy feels much smoother and more pleasant. However, the meditative joy may be so intense that it becomes enormously distracting. In fact, meditators will sometimes end their meditation early, just so they can go talk to someone about it. To conclude with our analogy, when all the tethered horses pull in the same direction, they form a powerful team that moves smoothly and is easily controlled. So too, a unified mind displays a smooth, controlled power in the movement of mental energy, and turbulence completely disappears. But not until the end of stage 9 will unification be complete enough for that to happen. Until then, you can expect your meditation to be dominated by experiences of excess, uncontrolled energy. Practices to help achieve physical pliancy and meditative joy. At some point, you'll experience the manifestations of physical pliancy, such as the absence of ordinary tactile sensations, feelings of weightlessness or floating, and pleasurable sensations throughout the body, grade 4 piti. When this happens, it's time to temporarily abandon the practices described in the section on exercising the newly compliant mind. You're in the home stretch for this stage. Now the most important thing is to completely ignore bodily sensations of any kind. Here are 2 practices that can help. Finding the still point and realizing the witness. This practice allows us to step outside our reactions to the sensory experiences associated with pacification and the arising of piti. This creates enough detachment to let these processes unfold naturally by themselves. Piti sensations still appear in awareness, but receive no attention at all. Start your meditation by becoming fully aware of the world around you. Explore your immediate environs with attention. Feel it in your body. Listen to the sounds inside and outside the room you're sitting in. Sense all of the activity that's going on. For example, you might hear airplanes flying overhead, traffic noises, birds and dogs, and various human activities. Then, let your mind identify and fill in the source of the sounds you hear. Picture in your mind the cars you hear, the airplanes flying through the sky, and the birds sitting in trees. Expand the scope of your attention to include a visualization of the constant ferment of activity going on all over the world, on land, in the waters, and in the sky. Reflect on the Earth as it spins on its axis, moving through space at thousands of miles per hour, surrounded by the constant motion of planets and stars and entire galaxies whirling through the void at inconceivable speeds. While keeping this universe of ceaseless movement and change clear in your awareness, shift your attention to your body, sitting in stillness on the cushion. Allow the contrast between the stillness of your body and the activity of the external world to saturate your consciousness. Keep your attention focused on your body while the rest of the world fills your awareness. Over time, you'll naturally become aware of movement and activity in the body, breathing, the beating of your heart, and pulsing in your arteries, and maybe the energy currents and involuntary movements of piti. Visualize all the other activity you know is taking place in your body, the movement of food through your digestive tract, the flow of blood through tissue, urine collecting in the bladder, and glands secreting substances of all kinds. Once you have a clear, strong sense of your body as a hive of activity, shift the focus of your attention to your mind. Let the hum of activity in your body join the rest of the world in peripheral awareness, while attending to the relative peace and quiet of your well-trained mind. Contrast the relative calm and quiet of the mind with all the turmoil, activity, and change in the realm of physical sensations, noting in particular that quality of mental stillness and peace. Allow your attention to dwell on the difference between your mind's inner stillness and the teeming activity in your body and the world. Inevitably, you start to notice that the mind really isn't that quiet after all, except when compared to everything outside of it. At the same time, you'll become aware of an even greater stillness at the core of your moment-to-moment experience. This is called the still point. Find that still point and make its stillness the focus of your attention. Relegate everything else to peripheral awareness, letting things remain or pass away as they will. Enjoy the still point, resting in it as often and for as long as you like. The strange sensations of pacification and the energies of piti will just blend in with everything else in the background of awareness, while attention rests unperturbed. Unification will continue. By doing this practice and investigating the still point, it becomes obvious that this is where all observation happens. The still point, in other words, is the metaphorical vantage point from which metacognitive awareness occurs, except that it's now become the seat of metacognitive attention. And the focus of your attention is the subjective experience of looking at the mind and the material world from a totally detached perspective. As you keep observing, you may also discover the so-called witness, the subjective experience of a pure, unmoving, and unmoved observer who is unaffected by whatever is observed. A warning is in order here. You will likely feel that you have discovered the true self, the ultimate ground of all experience. In a sense, you have, but it's not at all what you think. The witness state is the ultimate ground of your personal experience, but it has arisen in dependence upon the body and the world, and it will disappear with the body. Its real value and significance is that it points toward a much more profound insight, provided you don't make the mistake of clinging to it as a self. Doing so only nourishes the attachment we are all born with to the idea of being a singular, enduring, and separate self. Mistaking the witness state for a true self is what leads some people to claim that consciousness is the true self. To properly use the witness experience, probe more deeply. Go to the still point, the place of the witness, with a question. Who or what is this witness? Who is watching? Who is experiencing? adamantly refuse to entertain any answers offered by your intellectual, thinking mind. Also, don't be deceived by your emotional mind, which will try to make you believe you've found the answer when you haven't. Just hold on to the question as you experience the witness. If and when insight arises, it will be a profound insight into the truth of no self, and it will be so obvious that you'll wonder why you never realized it before. Don't judge yourself or your practice by whether or not you discover the witness, or whether or not you have insight into no self. These will happen in time. Meanwhile, the still point meditation is a powerful method for achieving the goals of this stage: unification, pacification of the senses, and meditative joy. The luminous jhanas. These are deeper than the whole body or pleasure jhanas, and are called luminous because the object of meditation used for entering the first jhana is the illumination phenomenon. This inner light is often called a nimitta, and the sensations of the breath are abandoned in favor of this luminous nimitta. Because it is mind-generated rather than being a true sensory object, it allows all sensory content to be completely excluded from consciousness. Not everyone experiences the inner illumination phenomenon, so not everyone can practice these jhanas. If you're one of these people, don't worry. Jhana practice isn't essential to mastering stage 8. Also, even deeper jhanas will become available once you've mastered the later stages. The nimitta may begin as a soft, fuzzy, or misty illumination, as a glowing disk or sphere, or as star-like, flickering pinpoints of light. If the nimitta is dim at first, it will gradually brighten. The pinpoints will expand, and multiple sparkles will coalesce. Colored lights tend to pale toward white, and the nimitta becomes more radiant, bright, and clear. When it appears, resist the temptation to chase the nimitta. It will usually disappear if you direct attention toward it too soon. To cultivate the nimitta, keep your attention focused on the breath sensations while allowing the illumination to grow and brighten in peripheral awareness. At the same time, don't completely disregard it. Be as fully aware of it as you can without diverting attention toward it. Sometimes it won't appear at all. Just remain patient. Eventually, it will be there all the time. Also, don't try to will it to grow or intensify. That actually prevents the nimitta from developing naturally, making it fade away. The nimitta must develop on its own. As it intensifies, the sensations associated with pacification of the senses fade from peripheral awareness. Sustained subtle dullness can sometimes creep in as you allow the nimitta to develop in the background, so be careful that doesn't happen. Otherwise you can get stuck and your undeveloped nimitta just won't go anywhere. As you'll soon discover, attention occasionally alternates with the nimitta in peripheral awareness. That's all right, because alternating attention lets you know when the nimitta has become stable enough to accept attention. Eventually, you will notice that when your attention shifts to the nimitta, it no longer fades. Once that happens, you can intentionally allow attention to alternate between the nimitta and the breath. Attention will naturally be drawn to the nimitta, spending more and more time with it. At some point, the breath and the nimitta will both be receiving the same amount of attention, and the two will seem to merge. When this happens, start working with the nimitta. First, intentionally let it recede into the background, appearing small and distant. Then, bring it in close, so that it completely fills your visual field. Next, try shifting the bright center of the nimitta up or down, or from side to side. When the nimitta is stable enough that you can control it like this, you're ready to completely abandon the physical sensations of the breath and attend exclusively to the nimitta. Not everyone will succeed in moving the nimitta, but it doesn't matter. As long as your efforts don't cause it to fade, It's stable enough to use for entering jhana. Entering first luminous jhana. Once the nimitta is stable enough to become the object of exclusive attention, you're ready to enter the first luminous jhana. Absorbing into this nimitta is not something you do. It's a surrendering that draws the mind into the experience of the moment. Open up to it totally, becoming a completely passive observer. The mind is relaxed but alert, and attention and awareness are sharp and clear. Entering this kind of deep jhana has been compared to submerging yourself in a warm bath. The bliss of physical pliancy floods the body with pleasure, pervading and saturating it everywhere. Meditative joy intensifies as well, and feelings of happiness grow as the bliss of mental pliancy increases. Energy intensifies as the mind fills with joy and happiness. You still feel energy sensations in your body, but they are no longer disturbing or unpleasant. Spontaneous physical movements cease, replaced by a profound stillness. Attention fuses with its object, and awareness takes on an open, spacious quality. The perception of the nimitta in the first jhana is sharper, clearer, and more intense than ever. At first, there may be some subtle unsteadiness in terms of the contents of awareness. Certain objects may intrude. For example, there may be some awareness of actual physical sensations, or of mind-generated bodily sensations due to pacification. But as you stay focused exclusively on the nimitta, these fade, and you're soon fully absorbed in jhana. If you've previously practiced the whole body or pleasure jhanas, you will immediately recognize when you've slipped into the familiar groove. But if you've never experienced jhana before, you may wonder how you will know when you've reached jhana. After all, the jhana factors are all present with access concentration, and if you were to describe the state of your mind in access, it would sound exactly like the classical descriptions of jhana. Just persevere. When you do finally enter jhana, you will no longer have any doubts about it. And best of all, the mind will know how to find its way back to this state again in the future. The jhana may not last long to begin with, especially if this is your first time experiencing jhana. But when you pop out, just go back in. Keep returning to jhana until you can stay in for longer, working up to 10 minutes, then half an hour, and eventually an hour or more. When you emerge, you will have a sudden experience of intense sensory awareness. Your mind is highly sensitized to every kind of sensory input. That's why we describe it as popping out. The deeper the jhana and the longer you've been in, the more intense the emergence. Practice entering the jhana at will, sustaining it for a predetermined period, and emerging at the intended time. To do this, you must generate a strong intention while in access concentration. People often find it useful to mentally verbalize these intentions. I resolve to enter first jhana and remain for X minutes. Remember, you cannot make these things happen yourself, because no doing or deciding happens in jhana. But holding a conscious intention prior to entering the jhana will cause them to happen. When you can stay longer in jhana, you will discover there is a timeless quality to it, meaning you have no awareness of how much or little time has passed. To practice remaining in jhana for predetermined periods, you will need to position an easy-to-read clock in front of yourself. Give it a quick glance before entering access, and again on emerging from the jhana. Once you emerge from jhana, review your experience. Compare and contrast the access, jhana, and post-jhanic states. When you emerge from jhana, there will be a very strong imprint of the jhanic state in memory. Compare that recollection with the post-jhanic state you're in. It's like putting two transparencies together and holding them up to the light. You can easily see what is different and what is the same. Do the same with your memory of the pre-jhanic access state. Then compare the jhana and pre-jhanic access states to each other. Notice the similarities and differences between each of these three states, what is present and absent, and the subjective qualities associated with each. The first jhana is characterized by profound calmness, a clear, sharp perception of the nimitta as the object of attention, vitakka and vichara, and awareness of joy, pleasure, and happiness, piti sukha. The mind is, of course, in a highly unified state, ekaggata. As you get more familiar with the jhana, though, you will realize that the intensity of first jhana often fluctuates. This instability is typical of first jhana. Sometimes you may even be aware of a thought or intention arising in the mind. Whenever this happens, it's because you have very briefly emerged, then immediately re-entered jhana, like a swimming dolphin that barely breaks the surface before diving again. Another first jhana quality you will become aware of over time is a subtle energetic vibration, often felt in the body. Eventually, you will grow increasingly dissatisfied with how the jhana fluctuates in intensity. This indicates you're ready for second jhana. But don't rush it. Getting stuck. You can get stuck at any point during the process of pacification of the senses and the arising of meditative joy. You'll know because you'll constantly have disruptive and often unpleasant experiences in meditation, with little or no sign of change or improvement. Say, for example, that every time after you sit down and achieve effortlessness, you always experience abrupt, violent, jerking movements, or an unpleasant tingling, itchiness, and hot flashes that just get more disagreeable over time. Or you experience intensely unpleasant energy sensations and severe pain in your chest or neck, or constantly feel like you're falling over. Maybe you often get dizzy, sweat, or feel nauseated. While a certain amount of this is normal, when it happens consistently and doesn't improve, something is blocking your progress. As we explained in the 6th interlude, it may be the hindrances of aversion and agitation due to worry and remorse. To the degree these hindrances are present, even at a subconscious level, they prevent unification of the mind and normal progress through the grades of piti. The antidote to aversion is deliberately cultivating love, compassion, patience, generosity, and forgiveness toward everyone, including yourself. The antidote to worry and remorse is practicing virtue in every aspect of your life. You can change bad habits and stop doing things that create the causes of worry and remorse. Make amends for things you've already done or failed to do, and if you can't do it directly, do it through acts of kindness and service to those who suffer in the ways you've made others suffer. Seek others' forgiveness, and especially forgive yourself. In other words, if you find yourself getting stuck in stage 8, the answer lies outside meditation, in how you live the rest of your life. Adept practice depends on everything you do, all day long, every day. There is actually an advantage to working through stage 8 in daily practice rather than in deep retreat. You have more opportunities to take the appropriate actions to overcome these hindrances. Thus, Ananda, the purpose and benefit of virtuous behavior is freedom from remorse. The purpose and benefit of freedom from remorse is satisfaction. The purpose and benefit of satisfaction is joy, piti. The purpose and benefit of joy is pacification of the body. The purpose and benefit of pacification of the body is pleasure, sukha. The purpose and benefit of pleasure is concentration, samadhi. The purpose and benefit of concentration is knowledge and vision of things as they really are. The purpose and benefit of knowledge and vision of things as they really are is disenchantment and dispassion. The purpose and benefit of disenchantment and dispassion is knowledge and vision of liberation. Kamattaya Sutta, Purpose and Benefits of Virtue, from the Anguttara Nikaya, 10.1.1.1. Conclusion. You've mastered stage 8 when you achieve physical pliancy and meditative joy almost every time you sit. Experiencing periods of grade 5 PT once or twice, or even every third or fourth time you sit, is not yet true mastery. Consistency is key. Ordinary sensations have disappeared from awareness. The perception of your body may have changed, feeling light and pleasant, and you have no need or desire to move. The illumination phenomenon, if present, has become an all-pervading light or bright, stable orb. The inner sound is either pleasant or just a meaningless, unobtrusive background noise. You still feel energy flowing through the body, circulating between the base of the spine and the crown of the head, and between the body core and periphery, but it's much smoother and more pleasant. The intensity of joy and feelings of energy may grow so strong that they can't be sustained, or they may make you want to end your meditation early. That's normal. Becoming familiar with meditative joy so this doesn't happen is the work